Hi everyone, thanks for inviting us. I am happy to be here. Today I'll show you how malware can attack Windows inter-process communication mechanism named ALPC and how to detect such kind of attacks. I think that this topic is of crucial importance for all Windows security experts. This work was done in collaboration with one of my students from National Research Nuclear University. Anastasia investigated attacks on ALPC mechanism in her bachelor thesis under my supervision. I'm eager. I've been exploring Windows security for more than 15 years. I've been curious about discovering new attacks on Windows kernel and finding the ways to prevent them. Please, Anastasia, continue.
Hello everyone. My name is Anastasia. Thanks for inviting me. I am really happy to be here too. So, let's begin our talk. Every application in the system is a process. Processes can exist apart from each other, but they constantly need to interact with each other for different purposes, to use dynamic linked libraries, verify the authenticity of the user to perform the operation on his behalf, get input text, create or remove threads, interact with Windows DCOM object model, and so on. The internal mechanism of Windows inter-process communication is ALPC, Asynchronous Local Procedure Call. Its purpose is to transmit messages between client and server processes. Even the simplest Windows application has at least one ALPC connection. ALPC is used in various Windows security tools, antiviruses, endpoint detection and response systems. To conceal ransomware attacks from such systems, hackers need to disable or modify ALPC. We conducted ALPC security study to provide advanced improvement of protection systems and prevent new threats. The most complex case of attacks using Windows kernel drivers was considered. The primary components of ALPC interactions are ALPC ports. There are three different types of ALPC ports. Client communication port, the port that client process uses to communicate with the server, unnamed port. Server communication port, the named port that server uses to communicate with the client. The server has one communication port for each of its active clients. Server connection port, the port that is specified in the request to connect to the server. This is a named port. By connecting to this port, client can connect to the server. Several clients can be connected to one server by using one or several connection ports, but client communication port and server communication port will be unique for each interaction. ALPC ports are stored in the operating system memory as ALPC port structure. This structure contains a set of fields with complete information about all objects in this interaction. The list of ports, port list entry, the port at the other end, communication info, messages queues like main queue, pending queue, wait queue, cancelled queue. Also there is large message queue, the owner process of this owner process, and others. The communication info field is of the greatest interest for our study. This field is an ALPC communication info structure. It is this structure that contains information about the connections of this port, address of connection port, client communication port, server communication port, and also a pointer to the connection descriptor table, handle table, and the connection close message. Below you can see the picture in the WinDBG debugger, where you can see a real ALPC port in system and its field communication info with all the fields. Integrity of these kernel mode structures and connections is not checked by any security tools, so modification of ALPC port structures can lead to disabling ALPC connections and illegal connections being established. As far as ALPC port structure contents are available only in kernel mode, they can be attacked using kernel drivers. Kernel driver attacks are very common nowadays. There are three the most popular techniques of such attacks. Bring your own vulnerable driver, user downloads malicious driver by himself, or it is downloaded into system via exploitation of existing vulnerabilities. Malware drivers signed with leaked certificates. Revoked and stolen certificates can be bought by the criminals on the dark web. Unified security threats. Firmware-level malware implants are the new trend of malware threats. Korkin and Korkin at the ADFSL and RootCon conferences in 2022 gave more than 50 attack examples accomplished using these techniques. Rapid7 experts in 2022 gave 30 malware examples that use buggy signed drivers. Trend Micro experts in 2023 analyzed low-level threats evolution in Windows and made a conclusion about actuality of kernel-level threats. Binarly Team guys were first who paid attention to ALPC vulnerability. In 2022, at LABScon and Ekoparty conferences, they demonstrated attacks on WMI based on disabling ALPC connection. We created a test bench consisting of applications client 1 and server 1 interacting via ALPC, and client 2 and server 2 interacting via ALPC. As we can see, client and server application interact in user mode, while their ALPC ports connected with each other in kernel mode. Attack number 1 via client port modification is a spoofing attack for server S1 and blinding attack for server S2. This attack targets client side. We change value of connection port in the communication info structure of client communication port of client C2 to the address of the connection port of server S1. As a result, client C2 is now connected to server S1, and server S2 is blinded and does not receive any messages. Attack number 2 via server port modification targets the server side. The connection port value in the communication info field of the server communication port of server S1 was changed to the connection port address of server S2. As a result of this attack, illegitimate connections between client C2 and server S1 are established, and server S2 is blinded and does not receive any messages again. Attack number 3 via client port modification and server termination is a more complex spoofing attack. It is performed in 3 stages. Firstly, client communication port of client C2 is modified as in attack number 1. Client C2 is connected to server 1. Secondly, blinded server S2 is terminated. If we check ALPC logs, message about incorrect ALPC connection will be only in blinded server logs. So, attacker can terminate blinded server in order to hide the attack. After that, illegal connection between C2 and S1 is broken, and server communication port field of client communication port C1 is filled with zeros. Finally, we replaced server communication port value in the same communication info structure of the C2 client communication port with the S1 server communication port address. As a result, illegal connection C2 S1 is active again. So, we demonstrated 3 new types of attacks on Windows ALPC mechanism. And as a result of these attacks, illegal connection from client to server has been established, and server lost connections with its client. For now, Windows do not have any security instruments to detect and prevent these types of attacks. We proposed a new security tool named ALPChecker, which is designed to detect ALPC attacks. Here you can see ALPCchecker architecture. It is written in Python language using subprocess model for interacting with Windows LABScon debugger application. So, ALPCchecker does not use ALPC in its work. LABScon uses its own driver to collect system kernel mode information and check integrity of ALPC connections. So, how do ALPCchecker works? Firstly, ALPCchecker collects all the information about ALPC connections and ports in system and distributes them by client and server connections lists. For each connection from this list, we check if there is connection with the same ALPC ports in another list. If there is no such connection, then found connection is suspicious and ALPCchecker generates security message. We tested ALPCchecker on our 3 types of attacks, and as a result, ALPCchecker was able to detect all 3 types of attacks on ALPC. And now, I want to show you short demonstration of ALPCchecker work. Here we have Windows 10 virtual machine connected to WinDBG debugger that will be used like embedded malicious driver. There are applications client 1 interacting with server 1 via ALPC and client 2 interacting with server 2 via ALPC. Let's run ALPCchecker now. We can see no problems detected message. Let's go to WinDBG and demonstrate our attack. Firstly, we run dmlproc command to get list of all processes in system. We can see our 2 ALPC servers and 2 ALPC clients. For each of these processes, we get ALPC ports via ALPC instruction. For servers, we can see 2 connections, where the first connection is with its client. For the clients, we also can see 2 connections, where the second is with its server. So, let's go to Watch tab and modify ALPC port structures of client 2. Here we use NT command to open ALPC port structure. This is client communication port of client 1. Same instruction we will use for client communication port of client 2. Here we open the structure, and in the communication info field we can see connection port, server and client communication ports. Similarly, we can see these fields in the second structure. We copy connection port value from the client communication port of client 1 and paste it to client communication port of client 2. Run our virtual machine again. Now we can see that client 1 sends message to its server 1. And client 2 also sends message to server 1. Server 2 does not receive anything. Let's execute ALPCchecker again. We can see alert message about attack on ALPC server. Below we can see a list of suspicious connections. Among them are a couple of incorrect connections that were terminating in the moment of program execution, and the last is our ALPC client connection. So, kernel mode attack on ALPC was successfully detected by ALPCchecker. Thank you very much for your attention.